Hello and welcome to Conversations with the Candidates on Houston Media Source Television. I'm Tim Langford with the League of Women Voters of the Houston area. On this broadcast, we have two of the three candidates for Houston City Council District G, Greg Travis and Crystal Pletka. And we will be talking with them for about the next 30 minutes or so, kind of getting to know them a little bit better and find out their positions on issues affecting the district and Houston as a whole. And I'd like to welcome both of you to Conversations with the Candidates with the League of Women Voters, and appreciate you showing up tonight and joining us. So I'm going to start, Crystal, with you. We drew lots before the show to see who would go first. I'm going to start with you. Tell us about yourself and why you got into the race for District G.
I'm Dr. Crystal Pletka. I am a scientist. I'm a mom. I am interested in making our district a better place. I got into the race because I thought that I could do some good. I could bring a unique perspective to City Council, being a scientist. I have been in the district for several years. I've been impacted by the flooding, by the street conditions, by some of the issues that people in our district face. And I thought that bringing a science-based view of things to City Council would enhance City Council meetings and be able to give everyone a different perspective.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Travis?
Well, Tim, thank you. 4 years ago, I was here going through the same process with y'all. And at that time, I basically let it be known that there was four things I wanted to do. I wanted to make sure that everybody knew I was accessible, the fact that we'd be transparent. I was going to be a liaison for the community, and I was going to be their advocate. I've lived up to each and every one of those promises. We've met those. Everybody who wants to has my cell phone number. If you don't have my cell phone number, it's because you haven't asked for it, but I give it out anyway. And people can call me or text me anytime. If you see me down in council, you'll see I'm very transparent. Usually it's me trying to get the administration to become more transparent. And then when it comes down to be the liaison, that's really the most important part of our job. Last night I was out till 10 o'clock at night because we had a super neighborhood meeting over there on Highway 6, Eagles Trace, and then I had an HOA meeting following after that. And I get home around 10 o'clock every night. It's a 60, 70-hour week job. People say it's part-time. It's not part-time if you do it right. And I enjoy the job. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy the job. But I think one of the most important parts of it is being the advocate, and that's where I come in. I'm a lawyer. That was my job before I became a council member. Now I'm a full-time council member. But I advocate for that district, and it is an unenviable position because a lot of times we feel like we're advocating for those that are considered privileged. That's not the case. My district is basically comprised of 5 sub-districts, and each of those has its own contingency. They have their own needs and their own interests, and they all need to be represented. And I think I've done a good job at that. And I'll leave it at that because I know you're shaking your head and there's
okay.
Time constraint.
No, I appreciate it. I want to make sure you each have equal time to answer some of the questions. The next one I'm going to ask about is flooding. Of course, I know for District G that's been a major concern. Both of you, as I understand, have had your homes flooded in the past or close to flooding. What would you do if elected or re-elected to council? What steps would you take to address flooding, not just in your district, but citywide as well? And we'll start with Crystal.
I think we need to really examine what we have in place and how to improve it. Obviously, things we've been doing aren't working great, ideally. I think that we should start working more closely with the county and have not just an advisory board, but a group that can work together and implement new policies. I think we should work on getting things cleaned out, the drainages, the ditches on the side of the roads, the bayous, work on cleaning all of that out, actually being more proactive in releases from the reservoirs, and just taking a greater view of everything and being more involved and working with other council members that have been flooded and other areas and really work cohesively across county and city and not just view it as a independent district issue.
Okay. Councilman Travis?
Well, what I would do is what I am doing. Just 2 weeks ago, I was down in front of Commissioner's Court, arguing to make sure that we got the work needed to be done on Buffalo Bayou. I'm not sure if anybody's aware of this, but Buffalo Bayou had 12 projects that were being prioritized by the county. And then they reshuffled them, and they put 7 of those projects at the very bottom. And they said, well, they're going to get done, but they're going to get done 2-3 years from now. And I tell everybody, well, a project delayed is a project denied. And so I was down there urging the County Commissioner's Court, and I'll say unsuccessfully because they didn't care. And I think people need to understand that, because a lot of what people think is the city happens to be the county. The city's job is basically to take that water that comes off of your roof, that goes to your driveway, that comes down that gutter, and get that to a ditch or get that to a bayou. At that point, it's the Harris County Flood Control. And Harris County Flood Control needs to be cleaning out those bayous and those ditches. The money needs to be going in there. We need to have the detention. And we as a city are moving in the right direction. We are actually doing inline detention under the streets. It's very costly. It used to be you had those 48-inch round drainage pipes, and we're moving to the 10 feet by 10 feet. With doing that, we're increasing the detention in the city underneath the streets themselves. And I think that's where we're going to have to go, especially in my district, because the land's too expensive. We've tried to find detention areas. You just can't find them. When you're looking at that, you're looking at basically $1 million for a lot. And when you start looking at how much we're going to need to do the detention, it's really in our streets. There's other things we can be doing as well. I mean, obviously the Addicks Reservoir and the Barker Reservoir are issues, but those are federal issues. And I've already been in contact with our representative, and I was in contact with the previous representative, telling them we need to have that dredged and we need to have those gates reinforced. And it's a slow process. The problem I've got is we're studying that. We've studied it. We know what to do. What we need to do is just do it. And there's not, right now, any dirt coming out of that reservoir. And we need to get that dredged immediately.
Well, let me follow up with a question about that. What can you do as a district councilman in your district, which encompasses at least the runoff area from the 2 reservoirs, both of you? What strength or what could you bring to force the federal government or force the Army Corps of Engineers or whoever operates those dams to make them better and make sure that a supervised release like we had during Hurricane Harvey that kind of caught everybody by surprise does not happen again, so that a lot of these neighborhoods that don't traditionally flood will stay dry? And Crystal, I'll start. What do you think?
I think a lot of it is just increasing that communication with the county. And in my case, I would actually be looking at all that geologic and scientific data that comes with it, looking at the hydrology and what are we passing? Like when we pass ordinances, we recently was contacted by a group that had found out that they passed an ordinance or approved something that allowed for less detention and more development, which is just going to increase flooding. And the reports aren't being looked at properly, and if they are, the reports might not be correct. And I think having the ability to look at that and look at that scientific data and say, well, that doesn't really make sense, and understanding what we can do to make it better. I think that's going to be a unique way to look at it, but also forcing our voices to be heard, like Greg has done with discussing and going down and fighting for our district, making sure that we are continuing to be that voice and being heard, but also interacting with county and federal and making sure that we don't just lay down and that we are fighting for our district.
Okay. What about you, Councilman?
Well, I think your question went back to what can we do with the federal government to get their attention.
Exactly, to make sure that that controlled release that happened during Harvey doesn't necessarily happen again.
Well, let me back up a little bit. As we all know, due to city charter, it's a very powerful mayoral form of government. The city councilmen themselves don't have as much power as the mayor. In fact, of the 21,000 employees in the city, I have 3. The mayor is 21,000. My job is to make sure he's well aware of what we need out there and make sure he acts upon it, and I have. But it's also to bring attention to it. And what you do, and what I do, is I go to the newspapers, I go to the TV stations, radio stations, and you basically try to get this issue in front of them. Because with that comes the public pressure. And with public pressure, people start taking notice. And that's just one of the aspects in which you actually can drive the conversation. And I think that's where you do that. Because again, when it comes to the federal government, the city doesn't have that much influence, and definitely the councilmen don't. I wish we did. I wish we had that. But they have been listening. They just take their time, and they like to study things to death. And again, we know what needs to be done. It's been studied. We just need to move forward and get it done.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Thank you. So I'm going to move beyond the flooding issues, even though I know that's a big topic in your district. But what do you see as some other issues that affect District G, and how would you address some of those issues? Crystal.
I think one of the other issues that really impact our district is infrastructure, and by that I mean the streets. We have, like Greg was saying, some construction going on with the inline detention underneath Memorial, but it's been taking a really long time, and also some of our other streets are impassable. Several residents have mentioned it to me. There was one I couldn't go down myself when I was pregnant because the potholes are so bad that Sally afraid to put me into labor. But I think that our infrastructure, our roads, we have a very busy area. We encompass Memorial, Briar Forest, Westheimer. We have those bounding areas, and we're a very long district. And having those east-west passages, we need to make sure those are well maintained, as well as all of the north-south passages like Kirkwood and Wilkhurst, just to name two of the ones I'm more familiar with driving down with potholes. And so I think that's something we really need to work on, is getting those roads and up to speed with also inline detention, but also making sure that people aren't going to wreck their cars or blow out tires or have accidents just because they hit a pothole.
Okay. And Councilman?
Well, I think there's a number of issues, but I think lack of police is one. I think the fact that the citizens have to pay for a lot of their own city services. We pay for our own garbage. We pay for our own constable service. We don't get all the city services we should. Right now, one of our libraries, which is the only community, it's not even a community center, but if it was a community center, it'd be our only community center. It's not up and running. And they told me to be up and running this year. And now they tell me it's going to be 2 years because we're waiting on Harvey federal funds from FEMA. With that said, I would also say is mobility is probably one of the largest issues. And with that, the roads are in bad shape. They have been. Some progress has been made. More needs to be done. I'm frustrated by this, and I think everybody should, is that we have a number of tiers in our community. And they bring in a lot of money, and the money has to be spent within that tiers. But the administration likes to count that money towards my district. And so consequently, four square miles out of 44 square miles are in the tiers. And yet that leaves the other 40 square miles without anything. And so I've been fighting to make sure that Kirkwood will be done. We're going to start that in February of this year. So Kirkwood will start being done, the first phase, second phase, and the third phase. But we've accelerated the southern part because that's where the most need is. And if anybody goes out there and sees Briar Forest and Kirkwood, you'll see that a lot of the roads been redone recently because I put a lot of money into the panel replacements. As you may know or not know, we get council district service funds. It used to be $1 million a year, now it's $750,000. I put as much as I can into panel replacements because seriously, we just don't get the CIP money that we should get. So I put $1.3 million so far into panel replacements in my district, which have improved everything. Dairy Asher is in need of a redo. Was on the CIP for years, and then we found out that it was all smoke and mirrors because it was based on federal money coming in. Federal money didn't come in. I'm working right now with the administration to make sure that we redo Briar Forest. Briar Forest, not just because it's a bad road, but because also the inline detention there will solve any of the flooding on the south side for years to come. So with that in mind, that's what we're looking at. We're looking at taking in some Harvey money, the federal money that has not yet come in. We're still waiting on $1.3 billion from the federal government. And when that comes in, I expect a portion of that to come out there to take care of that.
Okay. So that was actually my next question. How important are transportation issues to your district? What, aside from pockmarked streets with the potholes, which we have all across Houston, What other transportation issues do you see in your district that could be improved upon? And we'll start with you.
With the exception of the quality of the roads, I think also just the traffic. And we have those roads contain a lot of businesses on them, but also a lot of schools and homes. And it is very difficult to get around, often at rush hour and other times of the day, just to drive. And I think that impacts quality of life. I was talking to someone today right before I came here that part of it was due to construction, but to get a half a mile from his house, it took him 45 minutes. And that's just something that's problematic and affects people's quality of life. When you're having to build that much time in your day to go pick up your child from school, it's really impactful. And I think that working on some of our traffic flows, in addition to the construction, with making sure that the lights are working properly. And I know on Highway 6, every time it rains, the lights go out. And we have to call 311, and we have issues with getting responses from that. And so I think that goes to line with the city services of making sure that we're getting everything that we should be getting as residents of not just the district, but of the city.
Okay. Councilman?
Well, let's go back to, we have, in our district, we put in 37% of the city's revenues. We get back around 13%. It used to be 11%. I'd like to see that bumped up a little more. That would help us greatly. But I think what you're talking about, the mobility issues, happens to be maybe a multimodality where we're not just looking at cars, but we're also looking at buses, other ways of transportation, bicycle lanes, and that. I am a proponent of multimodality. I think that's a good way to go, but I don't want to do it at the risk of causing mobility issues in the city. And what I mean by that happens to be is there's a smart way of doing it and a not so smart way of doing it. And I think on the west side, there's a lot of distances there. There's a lot of people who are proponents of bicycle lanes on Westheimer and on Kirkwood. I'm not one of those. I like my bicycle lanes, but I like them on side streets and on center point energy corridors and on the bayou. I think the buses, I think the Metro is doing a good job on that. I know we're going to have a Metro bond issue coming up. I do have some issues with that, but overall it seems to be okay. But I think when we're on the west side, and I say west side because our district goes all the way from basically Shepherd all the way out to Highway 6. And then it goes all the way from I-10 all the way down to Westheimer. We take in all the Galleria and all this. So if you start looking at that, there's different needs in each part of that district. And the people on the far west aren't requiring or needing what the people in the Galleria need. In the Galleria, they're going to need more walkability. And so consequently, there's this whole different need altogether. And yet that's also covered by the tiers. And so when you do that, you have to work with the tiers to achieve that. And I think they are doing that over there. But, the same thing's going to be going over at City Center and over at Memorial. You're going to see a lot more of that.
Well, let me ask about tiers. And could there be another one created for outer areas, Derry Ashford to Willcrest area or even Eldridge? Would that help to build some money in for additional infrastructure, and would you support that if one was created?
I am not as familiar with the TERS as Greg is, but I would think if it was something that could potentially benefit the district as a whole and other areas and bringing in more money, I think that's something we should look at. But as with most issues, I like to approach it with an evidence-based perspective, and is this going to actually benefit, or is there more negative that is going to come from this? So it would have to be something I would look into.
Okay.
For 5 years, I've told everybody to listen, I hate tierses and I love tierses. And what I mean by that is if I could tiers my entire district, I'd do so, because that would keep the money in my district. So would I be in favor of it? Certainly. Will it ever happen? Of course not, because I have an administration who's not in favor of it. It's very hard to get one in place in any event, but there certainly won't be one on that side of town. But I'd love to see that. And I think that's what we need to talk about is, this is the only way we're ever going to get money here. Right now, the Memorial Tiers is at risk of being abandoned in 6 years. And some people want it to go away, others don't. I'm one of those who do not want it to go away, because if it goes away, no money will be spent out in that area. What I'm trying to do right now, and I'm working towards this, and that's actually seems to be moving that direction, is to get the tiers to annex the streets around Frostwood in those areas. And once they annex it, because a tiers can't do work outside its own district, but once it annexes it, it can go in and do that inline detention and redo those streets. Doesn't annex the houses on the street, it just annexes the street. So we are talking about that, we're working towards it. The problem is they don't have enough bonding capacity right now because there's such short term left on their existence. So we need to get that tiers to be extended. And I think there are games being played right now. It troubles me greatly that that we're not extending it. And the reason for that is so that the administration can get more money from the tiers. And I think that's distortion. I think we need to extend it, and I think we need to do so immediately. And then I think we need to get those projects done on the books. That'll help out the Frostwood area and all those areas around tiers, the memorial tiers.
Okay. Next question is about diversity, and no stranger to you. Houston is a very diverse city, no matter where you go. Chances are you're going to run into everyone. How would you communicate with those diverse populations in your district and represent the various constituencies on city council? And
I think I would start by just making myself very accessible and approachable to everyone, and hosting town halls and going to super neighborhood meetings and being out in the communities, not just near my house or where I frequent the areas, but going out in different locations and setting up a meeting, or just going to lunch in a new place, dinner, and just meeting different groups of people, and really just making myself available to all the residents and encourage them to bring their issues to me and thoughts, and if they have any ideas, and host events that they might want to see, and just really keep an open mind and encourage everyone to approach.
Okay. Councilmember?
Well, what I would do is what I am doing. I'm out in the community every day. I'm in my district 6 days a week, and on Sundays, my fiance and I drive around other parts of the city, because when we make decisions on city council, it affects other parts of the city, and I want to know those areas as well as my own area. But I go in front of all the super neighborhoods. I'm there every meeting. I'm there for all the HOAs. We go to the apartment complexes. We walk the streets. I actually will, on certain days, get out and walk a street and walk down on a Saturday and a Sunday and talk to the people. And that's what I've been doing for 3.5 years, soon to be 4 years. And I'll continue to do that. That's how I keep in touch with everybody. And of course, I'm always usually at a couple places. I have a bar out in the west side of town, and I've been there on occasion. I also go to George's Pastery over in Derry Ashford. George is a good friend of mine. And I'm usually there on Monday nights. And anybody wants to come over and talk to me can talk to me then. And again, everybody's always got my cell phone number. Anybody can call me or text me whenever they want to.
All right. So as far as diversity goes, what, and I'm not extremely familiar with District G. I know parts of it, having lived in that area at one point in time and driving through it. But what does the diversity in your district look like, and how could you attract and market your district to either maybe to increase that diversity of the types of communities that you have? And I'm start with you.
Our district is fairly unique, both in terms of the area that it encompasses, in that it's the bayou and the reservoirs and Memorial Park, but also that we are a different constituent and different population than the rest of the districts in the city. When you compare the statistics to other districts of the city of Houston as a whole, we do tend to have less diversity. Now, we do have areas that aren't the wealthiest neighborhoods and that are much more diverse. They're just smaller pockets compared to the rest of the city. And I think that a lot of our diversity is actually, and I don't know this for a fact, this is just my thought, is that a lot of our diversity is actually centered around our businesses, and that we have a lot of international populations that work in the energy corridor and in many of the businesses that run along our areas. Now, how many of them live in our district is another question, because a lot of them work there. But I think that just, again, by going out and making it known how welcoming our district is and approachable we are and how we want to improve our diversity and our communications, that I think by letting everyone know about that might actually help increase our own diversity.
Okay.
Well, diversity is sort of a code word. When we talk about diversity, I think we're always trying to talk identity politics, black, white, Hispanic, and such. We do have that diversity in our area, and I reached out to that through the churches. That's usually the best way to do it, and that's how I do it. In fact, we gave away a number of book bags to a number of children through that process by working with the churches. But we also have diversity in the sense that we have a lot of expats coming in, British Petroleum's out there, and I know in my neighborhood I've got a lot of people, they can't vote for either her or I because they're British or Scottish, but the fact is that's also a diversity. And they still need our services, they still own a home here, and they still live here. And the fact is I reach out to them also, not just through the churches, but also through companies like British Petroleum that employ them. And I'm friends with the head of British Petroleum, and same thing with all the other entities that are out there. And that's how you get in front of those people and find out what their needs and wants happen to be. But I guess, like I said, there's various phases. It is a unique district in a sense that, again, we have 5, I think, sub-districts, and you need to approach each one of those sub-districts on its own terms.
Okay. Obviously, Houston has 16 districts. You guys represent one of the 16 districts, and we're not counting the at-large positions that we have, which we have 5. If you're elected to city council, how are you going to work with all the different personalities and issues to best represent your constituents on city council? And I believe that I'm referring to, just to make that clear, the different diversities and ideas that come with having 16 or more people in a room trying to come to a consensus.
I think that this is one of those times that being in oil and gas would really benefit me, in that I've been in oil and gas for 7 years now, and you deal with a lot of different people. I've gone well site, and I've sat in the middle of a rig in the Gulf of Mexico. You meet a lot of different people on a rig, everywhere from the people that do the laundry and the cooking and that fly the helicopters, to the company men, to the town office, to the presidents of the oil and gas companies. And being able to communicate with all of those people at the same time has really enhanced my ability to stop and listen and really figure out what needs to be said. And not sometimes being the loudest voice isn't what needs to happen. Sometimes it is just listening and figuring out what everyone's saying and how you can help that situation. And I think that a diverse group like that is extremely helpful. I'm also on the board of directors for 2 different scientific organizations, and those are a large group of diverse, very opinionated scientists, and I'm the secretary for both of those boards, and I have to take minutes and listen but also contribute, and I think those experiences has really helped me hone that ability.
Okay, Councilmember?
Well,
you have experience in this, obviously.
Yeah. And I want to go back. You said there were 16 districts. I know you said the 5 are at large. I count those as the whole city. So there's really 11 separate districts, and then there are 5 council members who represent at large. I like to think I'm friends with all of them. I make a point to do that. Some people would think, and I make no bones about it, I'm more fiscal conservative than others. But I have friends who are not fiscal conservatives. I try to understand their viewpoint. We talk, we hang out together, we'll grab a drink, and I'll learn about them and I'll learn about their district. But as I said earlier, I drive around on Sundays. That's the one day I drive other parts of the city. And the reason I do that is so I can see the other districts, so that when the council members talk to me about their district, I can relate. And it's something that you have to do, you must do, and I spend usually 6 to 8 hours a Sunday doing that. And the reason is we have 644 square miles in the city. And I will tell you that I've been here for almost 30 years. I'm still finding parts of the city that I've not seen before. And I think it's a good thing to do. But with that said, when a council member does talk to me about a certain area or a certain precinct, I go, oh yeah, I saw that, or I remember seeing that. And I think that goes a long way to having an understanding with them. And again, I don't want to get involved in their district necessarily, because that's their district. They know it much better than I do. And I think that's the sort of how you approach this. You don't try to come in and try to take over that. What you try to do is help them in their areas and hope they'll help you in yours. And a lot of times they do. In fact, one of the good guys that I work with on city council is Jerry Davis. He's got a unique district, and I've got a unique district, and we're probably in different in many ways, but we're very similar in ways, and we both look at things very similarly. And I count him as one of my good friends.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about city council districts in and of themselves. Got the census coming up in 2020. After that, the city council lines will probably need to be redrawn again. I know there was a little bit of a protracted fight the last time after the 2010 census before we got the districts finalized. What are your thoughts, and what would you bring to the table to make sure that not necessarily that the lines stay the same, but they accurately reflect that the districts actually accurately reflect the areas in which they are serving? And I'll start with you.
I think that that's actually one of the things that is unique to our district, is that we do have that difference between the other districts. And I think that is definitely something that when we get the results and we are looking at it, is actually look at the compositions of the districts, and are they equitable? Are we purposely districting an area that has not as many funds and has worse infrastructure issues and other problems? Are we purposely keeping that district by itself? Or do we need to look at how those lines are drawn to redistribute resources? I just think it's something that, again, we'd have to look at the data as it comes up and see how we can make it better. To really, how do we improve anything? And we don't ever want to make it worse.
I don't know how you do it effectively without possibly expanding it. And I wouldn't be in favor of expanding it. It has its own set of issues then. You look at places like Chicago, New York, and they've got 50 council members. And what happens when you do that, then you start to not only micromanage, but only micro-represent. So I wouldn't be for that. But I would say this, is every district is unique. In my district, River Oaks is different from the west side. They have different wants and desires, needs. You have to be aware of it. But if you wanted to, in the redistricting, expand and start making additional districts, I don't think that's the answer. Same time as I do think you want to keep districts that are similar. Similar in those wants and needs and desires. And the reason for that is then the people that are working within that community are much more in tune to satisfying and solving those issues. And that's the way it should be. I think right now the districts, prime example is Kingwood and Clear Lake. It's not in our district. Our district's very compact. Actually, ours is one of the better ones. But when you look at E, I think that probably needs to be examined, because I don't think Kingwood and Clear Lake have much in common. And I think that needs to be addressed. So there's a lot of that type of discussion that's going to go on. And there'll be people who are going to be complaining about that because it's going to dilute somebody else's power base. But when you look at that, I think people in Kingwood have more in common with the people in the north, and people in Clear Lake have more in common with the people in the south, for the reasons of just geography.
Okay. So Houston, and I'm sure your district as well, we want economic development. We want to see more businesses coming, offering more jobs, better paying jobs for our workforce. But we also want to preserve our quality of life. So how would you balance those two concerns? Obviously, I believe it's projected that we're going to jump up above Chicago this next census. So how would you balance those concerns if elected to city council? And I'll start with you.
I think that it definitely is a balancing act, and that as much as we want business growth and expansion, we need to be aware of the limitations of our city in terms of we have finite drainage, we have finite green space, and if we continue to take that away, we are going to increase our issues with flooding and not make it any better. And that is definitely something that we need to closely examine every time we have a new construction. Now, I think that as a city, we are very attractive to do businesses, and I think that diversity of our city really helps us pull in that, much like Austin, when I was living in Austin, having that ability to say that you're in Austin or you're in Houston, you have this diverse nature and all these different countries represented and people and backgrounds and education and skill sets, I think that is something that can definitely bring people in. I just think we need to make sure that we are properly developing and using resources we already have, of buildings that have already been built that aren't being used to their maximum efficiency. We have half empty or mostly empty high rises, and we need to start marketing that in a way that can help us bring business but not add to our construction and development issues.
Okay. Councilman?
Well, I think as a city we are doing it. I think that's what you see our success. We are growing. A lot of the other major cities are not, but we are. I think obviously, and we can talk about this later, and it'll be hopefully the question will be about crime and about police and what's the proper number. I think that goes a long way to making a livable city, is making sure everybody feels safe. But with that said, I think you keep your regulations to a minimum. Obviously, we don't have zoning. In some respects, that's bad. In other respects, that's very good. And if you think about it, we have not one downtown, but 5 downtowns. In fact, a little known secret that people don't realize is the Galleria area, which is in our district, is actually larger in terms of square footage than our own downtown. When you look at retail, residential, and commercial, the Galleria is larger than our downtown in square footage. If it was its own downtown, if you put it out in the middle of a desert, it'd be the 13th largest downtown in the nation. So we're doing quite well out there in that. We've got 2 5-star hotels. One's built and one's coming to be built. And I think, as I said, if you keep the regulations to a minimum, the development will occur. And what drives that is the free market. People know what they want. They know what they'll go to. Look at City Center for a prime example, or even Memorial City Mall. It's transformed, and it is transforming. And I think in 15, 20 years, you're going to see something totally different over there. That's being driven by what people want. And so I don't think it's anything that we should be directing as a city. I think we should make sure that we provide the proper infrastructure, make sure that there's security, and then let the people decide.
Okay. So I want to kind of piggyback on your on this question about economic development. There's been a push across several states on rent controls to keep housing affordable. I don't believe that that's right for Houston, because there are areas of town, and I happen to live in one, where rent is very affordable. But there are parts of town where it is very expensive. There's been several talk of developing a mixed, not just mixed use, but mixed income housing. Would you support, either of you support expanding those types of developments in your district, and why or why not? I'll start with you, Councilman.
The answer is I wouldn't, and here's why. I've actually fought some of that, and people were wondering, and I tried to make it very clear to them, is we don't have a lot of the resources that the low to moderate income need. So if you are to place low to moderate income housing in District G, then to get those services, people have to travel 7 to 10 miles. And a lot of these people don't have cars. So you're really putting a huge burden on people when you do that. And that is an imposition that is trying to be done on the federal level. And I resist it, not because I don't want affordable housing in my area, but mainly because I grew up poor. Until age 7, the only running water near my house was a creek. I know what it's like to use a outdoor bathroom. And those were the things that I grew up with. I was country poor. And I also know what's important when you are poor. And that happens to be a good network of people to help you. And you need to be close to that which you need. And in this case, a lot of it happens to be city services and federal services. We don't have that in my district. The real estate's too expensive. The federal government doesn't put their offices there. And so anytime you need something, you are going to be heading out of our district. And I just think that's an imposition on people. We just don't need to do that.
Okay. Crystal?
I will somewhat echo that in the sense that transportation, I think, is a major impact, a major factor in all of that. I know of a woman that travels 3 hours one way by bus just to get to her job. She works in District G, but she lives by Hobby Airport. And that's a lot of travel for someone that doesn't have a car, and she's working at a daycare, which I would pay her to come to my daycare because I love that she's there. But The point being that I do think that transportation and, like Greg was saying, the location, closeness to other and proximity to other things is very important. I don't know the statistics about the rent control and the impact it would actually have, but I do think that's something that we should not do lightly, and to make sure there are several areas I know that have affordable rent. I've lived in them as well. And I know that there are some places that have much higher rent, and that's, if you're in an apartment right next to an oil company, you're going to have a little bit higher rent. Most people aren't necessarily going to want to live there. But I do think that having the access to transportation and the government services is a factor, and if we are going to change to and control certain locations, I think that should be one of the factors examined.
Okay. And I didn't mean that as a gotcha question. It was just something that kind of popped into my head, and I hope you all don't feel that, either of you feel it was a kind of a gotcha question. So in the little bit of time that we have left, tell viewers and your constituents, what makes you the best candidate for your position, for your district, and what can you do, and where can they learn more about your campaign? And I'll let the council member start.
All right. Well, I've had almost 4 years on council. I would tell people, if they haven't seen what I've done or know what I've done, then they've not been looking, they've not been watching. I'm going to continue. I'm not going to change. I'm still going to be a fierce advocate for my district. I'm still going to be out in the district 60, 70 hours a week. I'm still going to be the liaison to the mayor's office and to the other council districts and to the county and to the federal government. I'll still act as that. And I'm going to be transparent, as I always have. Anybody who wants to come down and walk into my office, they can shuffle through any of my drawers and look at any of my computers. They can do whatever they want. And accessible. I have been, I'll always be accessible. My phone number is 832-627-8203. That's my cell phone. I ask people to text me if they can, because I'm in meetings a lot. But you can always text me, you can always call me. And you'll always get a call back or a text back.
Okay. And Crystal?
I think I would bring a fresh, unique, science-based background to City Council, and it's a new perspective. And I think that I could really be the voice of our district and help unify the city as a whole. Not that it necessarily needs more unification, but I think being approachable and cohesive would be extremely helpful. I'm going to be accessible and approachable and easy to find. I talk to people everywhere I go, in the grocery store, at the restaurants. I too go to George's. It's fantastic food. If anyone wants to go to George's Pastoria, it's excellent. But being out there and approachable and visible is, I think, the number one thing. And knowing that someone can come to you and talk to you is the best thing a council person can have. And you can find out more about me at crystalpletka.com is my website, and I'm on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, and you can find me there.
All right. Well, I thank both of you for joining me this evening for conversations with the candidates by the League of Women Voters. And we will have this up on the Houston Media Source website soon. So if you missed it, you can get a chance to, or missed some of it, you can get a chance to watch it again. Every year, the League of Women Voters of the Houston area publishes its Voters Guide. The guide is where we pose a set of questions to the candidates from a number of local elections and ask them for written responses. The Voters Guide will be available in mid-October, so just about a month from now, before the early voting session begins. It will be available in print, as well as at our website, lwvhouston.org. And you can also find it on the League of Women Voters 411 app. You can find that in the App Store on your device. And this year, the printed version and the online version will be available in English, Spanish, Vietnamese, and Chinese. So looking forward to that. Our handy-dandy Voters Guide is now on our website. Oh, I've already talked about that. I feel like, but it'll be available to Harris County voters also on Election Day. Statewide constitutional amendments will also be listed, as well as local issues, and all the candidates, including these two here, for the Houston City elections. The Board of Trustees for HISD and Houston Community College are also on the ballot this year. And I'd like to remind you about the League of Women Voters Rising Stars Leadership Program. Applications are being accepted through Sunday, September 15th. If you'd like more information about our Rising Stars program, please go to our website, lwvhouston.org. In just a few days, as I said, Media Source will post this on their YouTube channel, and it will also be available on the League of Women Voters Houston Facebook page. You can look that up at LWV Houston. For the League of Women Voters and Houston Media Source, I'm Tim Langford. Thank you for joining us.
And y'all are clear.